Hello everyone, welcome to Serie 2 of Coding Qualitative Data. Um, Serie 2 is the continuation of Serie 1 here of the coding process of my article, right? I used manual coding. What is coding? So coding is an important process as it develops an assertion that explains a phenomenon which could lead to the development of theory. So what we need to understand is that in qualitative research, coding is the reducing of data from a huge collection of data, right here, and the findings is a representation of my data in a meaningful way that addresses the research question or my research question. So my raw data are field notes, okay, here, the interview transcript, um, visual and audio data, as well as documents, which I assign labels called codes. So these codes can be a word, a phrase, or sentence that captures the essence of the data. So my coding process is first to label the statement into codes, which I repeat can be word, phrase, or sentence. Then I will sort my codes, so putting my codes into groups according to their relationship, um, which is called the categories. All right. For example, here language. I have selected language. So language um, captures the essence of the data, anaerobic and aerobic. All right. I will go in detail later on. So um, And then I synthesize means I put these pieces of categories together to develop a theme and then to an assertion. So I move from the real to the abstract, and it must link to the data so that I can address my research question. So during my data collection phase, I document my reflections in the comment here column here. I use memoing also during my data analysis phase to document my thoughts about my codes um, and categories, their meaning, the relationship about my codes, and the categories and themes. Because as a qualitative researcher, you are the instrument. Also, memoing is useful here in chapter 5 when I do my interpretation. So there are several ways of coding. So for me, I find it easy to just highlight it in red. I highlight the data that I am interested in red. So um, in coding methods, you have the first cycle and the second cycle. Now the first cycle will have um, um, you can have first level coding, a second level coding, and much on. So this different levels of coding actually means that you reduce from a chunk of sentence, you reduce it and you reduce it more. All right, that is all it means. So you have here the first cycle methods, and then after the first cycle, you will have the sorting and categorizing codes and generating themes based on the relationship between codes or the underlying meaning across codes or the codes frequencies or all of them. And then pat- pattern coding. Then now in individual coding, you code by using the informant's own words, and in descriptive coding, you describe the data that you have, and normally it is in nouns, for example, schools and bin. Yeah. So my research question here is an ontological research question, and I want to capture the informant's reality. So I'll start off first with language. Yeah, language. So why I chose language first. So in this context, culture sharing group means a group of informants who have contact with one another, and they share a common language which connect them um, to each other by their invisible web of behaviors, patterns, and rules, where culture is that invisible web. Now, the metaphor of culture as an invisible web is explained by kids. So, I'll start off first with my field notes. Now, what's important for me is how I arrange my data. When I collect my data, I arrange them according to chronological order. So focusing on field notes, let's take folder 17, 5 of October, my visit to the sample site. In this particular folder, I have all the raw data from visual to audio and as well as the field notes. And if you see here, coding is actually the coding scheme for this particular visit. So you will have a plethora of categories here. All right. Now focusing on field notes, I have here my field notes from the beginning when the time I entered my sample site and these little dots here to say how I reach at this point. My observation is a classroom ethnography. Now I focused on the comments because I'm interested in explaining to you the category language. Yeah. So I have shown you here the coding scheme that I have noticed. Why I'm showing you this is to show you how I present my coding scheme. Now I present it in Microsoft Word in columns and row. And if you see here, there's row 1 up to 12 up to 14. Now I'm focusing on folder 17. Now folder 17, if I'm focusing on language, so it is the 12th row that I discussed about my field notes on the essence the category language, which captures the essence of the data, which is anaerobic and aerobic. All right. And as I move on in my coding process, you will find here um, row 14 as well. So I have here, you will find the first level of coding, second level of coding from this chunk of sentence. I reduce it to a much shorter sentence and then I put it in the category here. Now, notice the difference I have with Latin and language. Now, I left it this way to explain to you that the process of my coding schemes are iterative to mean that I develop a coding scheme to the data and then I re-evaluate it. And I also bring my codes and my categories to my debriefers and get second opinions from this. Now, this increase your credibility. Now, I left Latin here to show you that in the beginning, I chose to put anaerobic and aerobic as Latin for the category to capture the essence of these two data. Now, my debriefers highlighted to me that these terms are actually Greek and suggested that it would be better to categorize it as language. And so you notice, as you see here, I have left Latin to facilitate purely for myself to remember that I once had this Latin and now it is improved to language. And it is also good for my audit trial as well, and also to go back to backwards if ever I need to know where I made the changes. So I added language here as the new category suggested by my debriefers. Now, as I move on to the next, which is the raw data for interviews, I look at the 15 folder, and these are all the raw data that I have, and these are the interview transcripts. And you will find that I've selected here voice 3 and voice 7. I've highlighted what is of interest to me, but for this particular category language, this part here is of interest. Now, if you would like to put the time, the duration in that voice recording of yours, you could as well. Yeah, so I've made an example here. So I've put here now in my coding scheme voice 3 in folder 15 and voice 7 in folder 15. So I have reduced it to the second level, and I've selected here memorized calculations as part of the language. It captures the essence. Language captures the essence for this particular data. And in this particular data, we are talking about Latin terms, which again I corrected as this is Greek, and I finally put it under the category of language, and language captures the essence of this raw data, this coded data here. Now it is the same for here and here as well. So this is about the calculations and the formula, and this is about the scientific terms we have. The next that I'd like to show you is I've also selected folder 13, my visit to the school on 28th of September, where I looked at the visual raw data, and I've selected in this textbook slide 6 and slide 14. And what is interesting for me here in slide 14 is that this textbook is in English and in Bahasa Malaysia, but the informants choose to respond in Bahasa Malaysia or Malay. So I have put this in my coding scheme on 13, slide 6. Now this is the first raw, meaning that the students use Bahasa Malaysia BM, and the second level says that the language informers are comfortable with Bahasa Malaysia. Now this one I have made it myself. I have devised the sentence to explain the raw data here. Now this code here, the sentence here, it captures the essence for my category here. Now if you notice that I have here field notes, the coding schemes for field notes, interviews, and visual photography. Now, this is for the purpose of triangulation, because this is the other ways of increasing your credibility. So, the interpretation that I give for language, now reminding you that I am in the interpretivism paradigm. The language here is the category language revealed that the students had trouble, or the informants had trouble, remembering the plethora of scientific terms. So this is consistent with previous studies by Baker and Halimera that the lack of language use could hinder science learning. So Halim and Mera said that the language of scientific and technological knowledge was English. However, they revealed that the level of English for Malaysian students and consistent, particularly in my context, the Malaysian students in my context were low. So I will continue to discuss about the coding process in Serie 3, and if you would like more content, please click the subscribe button and hit that notification bell. I welcome any comments here or in ResearchGate here as well, and I hope to see you in the next series then. So until then, thank you.